My guest today, Erik Honda. Thanks for coming on.
No problem.
My
Thank you.
guest, my student, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu student now with us. How long you been with us at Hard Drive?
I'll be a year in June.
That just blows my mind, man.
Yeah.
Like it seems like you just came a few months ago.
Yeah.
You work in law enforcement.
Yep. I'm a police officer.
Tell me about before law enforcement. Tell me about your upbringing and kind of the experience, abbreviated, of course,
Okay.
but like the important things in your life that led us to current present day where we're at right now.
I grew up out in Washington,
Okay.
right outside Seattle. So I was out there my whole life until I came out to college. Started wrestling at a really young age. And I knew once I kind of hit a certain age that like that was going to be my path. I was extremely obsessed and committed to the process of wrestling. So that was kind of, wasn't the best student growing up, and I figured that was my path to college. Mm-hmm. And when I was in high school out in Washington, there was only 4 schools that had wrestling. There was a Division II, Division III, and 2 junior colleges.
Okay.
Well, going into my senior year, the Division II announced that they were cutting their program. The Division III is where my freestyle club, we ended up training with them at kind of one of their facilities. Mm. And it sounded like they were going to cut their program within a year. So that, I was like, yeah, that's out. And then one of the junior colleges was like 5-10 minutes away from my house. So we ended up we would go from our high school practice to the JUCO practice. Made some calls, did some recruiting stuff, and then I started getting recruited by a couple schools out here.
Okay.
UD, University of Butte, gave me the best financial aid offer, and
they've had some good wrestlers too.
Yeah.
Cole Williams is a guy that used to train with us back in the
Cole started with me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're the same age.
That seems about it. Yeah, I guess that seems about right. Yeah, but he was one of the. I mean, it's a long time ago we trained with Cole, but I knew just looking at Cole if he came out of University of Dubuque, because I hadn't heard about him before, and I was kind of naive to wrestling. Like I just didn't know that much about it. But I saw him and I went, well, they're putting out some good wrestlers then.
When we started in 02, 03 was our first year there. It was our coach's first year, John McGovern. He's been there since then, but we were the first full team they had in years. Like they're kind of on the decline, and then even the university had a lot of issues, and then they started really building back up to like you go to it now, and I mean we go to Dubuque a lot, and you drive around that campus, and it looks like a small Division I college. Yeah, there's a lot of money and a lot of facilities there.
Some high schools now look like colleges. I've noticed.
It wasn't like that when we were there, but they have this stuff now. But so I came to college out here. It's the first time I've ever been to Iowa. I flew in to start college. And
what was the culture shift like? Was there any culture shift from where you grew up and like coming out here that you noticed right away? You're like, whoa, this is different.
Yeah. I mean, growing up, because where I lived in Federal Way was right off I-5. So you're, 90,000, 80,000, people in our city, but it's just kind of like an extension. There's no like real. Each city out there is kind of just like an extension of the other. There's just like little
into something else.
There's like little boundaries, but it's all kind of just one big blah.
Yeah.
And then coming out here to being like, oh, this is a distinct city. And then you have distinct area country.
I have to travel 20 minutes to go anywhere.
And I joke with my brother, because my brother drives into work. He lives in Seattle, and he has to drive into work, and he's like, yeah, my drive's like 30, 40 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, but you're going like 10 miles. Like I drive 30, 40 minutes and I'm going 30 miles, 40 miles.
Covering some distance.
But no, it was different coming out here. Coming to the Midwest, and like we knew our neighbors. Mm-hmm. We were friendly with our neighbors, but everyone worked somewhere else. You live here and you hop on I-5 and you can work anywhere. Mm-hmm. And, no one worked in the city. So it was coming out here and seeing how friendly people were and like how concerned and caring people were about each other. It was that was a little off.
You trying to carjack me?
Throwing off a little bit at first, because it was like, whoa, people actually care about you. And like, why do you care about me?
Yeah. There's kind of a Midwestern courtesy
Yeah.
The common courtesy, and it is distinct because people are friendly elsewhere. Like you got Southern hospitality. Like you have all of these, and I think what the message is that people inherently are friendly. Although there are some populaces that maybe that's not the case. I'm not going to point them out, but there is this very much like I'll hold the door open for you, courtesy. This Midwestern values that. I won't ever leave. Like I'll travel around, but the people here, I feel like are some of the most trustworthy and genuinely kind people that I've met in the United States. So.
Like when my wife and I, we started having kids and stuff, and we kind of had the conversation of, do we want to move closer to, my family or move closer to her family? Her family's from Iowa. But it was kind of like, well, no, I like it back home, but I would rather raise my kids here. My kids know our neighbors. Our neighbors look after our house. You look after, and it's just like that courtesy, that Midwestern vibe is just, that's an ideal I want to raise in my kids. Yeah. Even if they move off to somewhere else, that they have that concept of community. Maybe they can take that community to, a metropolitan place that doesn't have that concept of community, and then start bleeding that into that metropolitan place. It's just, we can plant that with one, we can plant that with others.
Well, I feel like there's even employers that outsource to the Midwest because, and I don't know if I'm talking out my ass on this, but this is what I've heard, that they look to the Midwest to harvest talent because you have people that are used to a very low cost of living and that work really, really hard. Yeah. And that's it. So why wouldn't I go to the Midwest to get somebody to do a job when, you know how those LA people act? I'm just kidding. There's all kinds of people in LA mad now, like it's a city and not a long string of different.
LA. I've been there a few times, and
I like LA.
It's mind blowing when you're driving down I-5 or you're flying into LA and you just see lights. Yeah. You don't see any like dark, because like if you see dark, you're like, okay, that's kind of like woods or that's natural, and you're like, where's the dark at? Like, you don't see anything. It's just it's lights.
The thing that I thought about LA when I was coming up, and I didn't really know the specifics or the neighborhoods or anything, but I thought that it was just a big city. Yeah. And what I found out is like you said, it's a long chain of communities that kind of go along the coastline, and it's what is LA? Like if you live in LA, I would presume that you have to get very specific about where you live in LA to designate yourself. So you moved to Iowa, and then what after that? What came involved here after college or after your experience there?
So I went to school to become a teacher. Okay. Graduated from college, and I ended up getting a teaching job right away, special education teaching job right away. I got a teaching job down in Clinton, Iowa, and that was an experience.
Well, I mean, that's vague. Give me the details.
Clinton, Iowa has a very high generational poverty rate, and I've been around poverty from being in somewhat of a bigger city and then seeing it, and going to that, it was very eye-opening because you saw kids as young as, I was working in 6th, 7th grade, and you saw kids even as young as that having no hope. Really? Because they've seen it. They've seen it in their parents, they've seen their grandparents, and they've all seen this cycle over and over again. And it's like, how are you in 6th grade and not have hope?
Never found it.
Yeah, and it's mind blowing, and that was very eye opening to experience that and work with that. And
I bet.
So I did that for I got that actually half a year. Did that, and then I ended up getting a job in Dubuque, teaching in Dubuque. I did that for 7 years, I think, 7, 8 years, something like that. And then,
why'd you get out?
I was burning out a little bit, burning out of the process, burning out of kind of the situations I was dealing with. I just kind of, I wasn't in a good headspace mentally.
Did you feel limited as a teacher?
Yeah. I was working with a lot of pretty extreme cases, and, it was kind of one of those situations where it was like, well, I can do so much from these hours, and then that's all I have. And then you have all these other outside agencies that are like, okay, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And it was like, well, nothing seems to be helping this child. And it seems like everyone was pulling in their own direction, in their own thing. They want to do this, and they're the best, and they can do this. And I was like, well, I don't care. Like, I don't care. If you're the best, then let's do that. If you have the best ideas, let's do it. Let's just help the kids. And it was just seemed like there's too much of that. There's too many chiefs, not enough Indians.
Would you say that there was too much focus on these different agencies claiming victory and not enough on the actual victory, the point of the process itself?
Yeah.
Like, we'll try my method because I think it works better. And it's like, well,
I think the main goal was lost on people. What's the goal? You have, the medical field thinking that this is some sort of, they have to do something medically. And then you have education saying we have to do this educationally. And I think the ideas were all lost. The main idea was lost, was like, what can we break down to be the main idea of how, this kid is at this point and in such level of crisis, and then we want to get him to be a functioning member. I don't care if they're, 1600 on a SAT or whatever. I just want them functioning. I want them to be happy and functioning in society. And how do we get that? Yeah,
there's been a gripe in society about how the education system has kind of compartmentalized the education process and tried to standardize it for a kid.
Yes.
Not taking into consideration the vast amount of variables in the development of the mind and body of these kids. Did you feel like you got that vibe where there was just these cookie cutter type of solutions to getting test scores up or whatever, and not like a focus on how do we individually connect with each child?
So when I was teaching was right in the prime of the No Child Left Behind stuff. And we were hyper focused on test scores, and to the point where that's when you would have your list of schools. These schools are the lowest performing schools, and the school I was working at ended up having extra training, professional development, because we were so low on the test score wise. And I was like, okay, well, yes, but what is cause? What are some root causes here? Look at where we were at. We were at a high level of poverty. We were at a high level of transient within the community. So it's like we have all these other external factors, and it was like, okay, you don't have a kid for the whole, for a year or two to really work with a kid to build them up and educate them. How do you measure
the success and growth, intellectual growth of a child raised in an inner city as part of a cyclical generational poverty situation with somebody who lives in an upper class, tutored? Doesn't make any sense. There's no humanization of the process at all. It's just like, oh, this is the standard, and if you don't fit into it, we'll dump a bunch of money there, or we'll kind of skirt the problem and ignore it. But that was the big gripe too.
Well, and then it's cycled now, because now it's cycling to you had that, then you had the Common Core stuff, where it was.
I've seen some Common Core stuff. I think anyway. I don't know.
The Common Core is. I like the concept and idea of the Common Core, saying everyone should have this standard
of how to do math.
Yes, I like that idea, because then we have a base standard. We say everyone should be right here, but I think what was lost was, okay, that's the base. Like, why aren't we pushing people beyond that? Like, hey,
and who establishes the base?
Yeah, and that's kind of where it got lost in the politics of it. And
math, for me, when I was a kid, I hate math. I hate it. I love it scientifically because I know it explains everything. I just personally can't explain everything with math, but I know that things can be explained, and I know that the best math teachers that I've ever had worked with me for just a few weeks, established what would work best for me, and then taught me this method, even though they, being good mathematicians, knew 2 or 3 different ways to conduct this. The worst math teachers I've ever had tried to teach me all 3 ways and didn't leave me with a single one that worked. So I could see Common Core being the response to that, but who sets that base?
Yeah.
What's the interpretation? What's the easiest for you, and does that work with my mind? I think when you're dealing with the complexities, the social complexities,
Yeah.
the intellectual complexities, like you're talking about, you can't standardize anything.
Yeah. And, you know, even now my wife's involved she's a teacher now, and I'm seeing it, you know, at the education kind of from the outside, especially having a child in that, you know, the system now. And it's like, okay, it's kind of, you see that peaks and valleys of, you know, how, you know, it was super hyper on test scores, and then it kind of dipped on the test scores, and we're talking about Common Core, and then that's kind of going away to now, you know, this next phase of like these 5 + 5 is what? Well, if you can explain what 5 + 5 is and do all these different explanations, it doesn't matter what you wrote down what 5 + 5 is. It's just how can you explain your thinking. Okay, I can get behind the idea,
but that's not math, though.
Yeah,
that's,
exactly.
That's logic and reason, and you're not coming to a firm conclusion.
But if we're supposed to be teaching thinking, then let's teach thinking and philosophy,
and teach that concept to a 30-year-old person.
Yes,
not to 13-year-old or something.
Someone whose brain is just developing and not have the ground roots of basics yet.
Yeah.
You know, it's
I feel like, and this is just my personal opinion, I feel like you could eradicate the Department of Education over a series of years. I don't think it serves much purpose outside of just this type of standardization and a way to allow federal money to slip out into the education system. Take all that money that you've spent at the Department of Education, millions and millions of dollars, billions probably, use it to take kids on sponsored travel.
I like that.
Have them go somewhere safe, but somewhere that's going to show them that, like, you got it pretty good. And this is real perspective. This is like reality. This is what your life is going to have to deal with. And if you don't have to deal with this stuff in your life, you have to be aware that other people are dealing with this stuff in their life. Boxing people up in a classroom in 2020 and going, you must learn this way and these facts and the story of America and the way we want the winners of wars want you to know. It seems so dated. Yeah. And now we have the internet and technology, and people more than now don't know what they're talking about. What made you want to get into law enforcement?
So while working in the schools, I worked with a really, really good SRO, school resource officer. Came one of my friends, and I had always had like two career paths. It was always kind of going to be that law enforcement route or the teaching route. I had a learning disability growing up, still dealing with learning disability issues, you know, even in my 30s, and will do my entire life. But I had to the point where I wanted to affect change as I had a couple teachers affect change in my life. And so that's kind of why I went down that teaching route. But I always had like that kind of bug with law enforcement, and working with this SRO and just seeing how he worked with the kids in the schools and stuff. And I was like, you know, I'm at that point now where we had just had our first child. I was like, if I'm going to make a career change, I'm going to make a career change now. You know, he's young enough that we can make the career change, and if we have, you know, a salary dip or something like that, we can survive. And you know, if we have to move, we can survive. And so I kind of was like, yeah, let's go for it. And I tested for police department I first worked with, and didn't get the first round, so I had to go back and test again the next year, and I ended up testing again the next year and got into it, and started working for them. Went to the law enforcement academy, and I've been in law enforcement since then.
How long have you been in law enforcement total now?
Since 2014.
Okay, so you've been in for six going on 7 years.
Yep.
Awesome. So law enforcement's a hot topic now.
Yep.
Law enforcement wasn't really a hot topic when I was a kid. If you go back in time, you're always going to see that there's been good police work, bad police work. I feel like now you just see it a lot more. I feel like now you don't see it more because it's happening more. You see it because people are recording it. Yeah. People have phones. There's videos in every corner of everything. So just like plane crashes, they never happen really, but when they do, they're caught. Yeah. They're sensationalized. And this is now becoming a huge topic of diversity inside of our country. I remember seeing these videos. The one video that really sticks out in my mind was a video of a guy being shot in the back as he was running away from a police officer.
South Carolina?
Probably.
Yeah.
Where he was pulled over for like some kind of registration issue or tag issue.
Yeah, I don't know.
Somebody was filming, and it was unbeknownst to him, and the guy broke free and ran away, and he was like 15 or 20 yards away maybe when he got drawn on and shot. In these situations, when somebody's running, a lot of times they are trying to shoot you potentially, or you don't know if they're going to draw, so you never really know what's going to happen. But when this happened, I was very, very critical, and I took to the social media medium, and I said, this is not just. To shoot a person in their back for this is not just. There's no excuse for it. Police should be held to a higher standard. They should hold themselves to a higher standard. There shouldn't be any defense of this type of behavior, things that are crystal clear. And there's some people that I'm actually really good friends with now, who in their own social circles were calling me a cop hater. And it's like I'd worked with law enforcement in the martial arts gym since I've been in martial arts, basically. Yeah. And I was like, well, I think there has to be a medium to be critical of people that we hold in such high nobility, or we are told that we need to hold in such high nobility, people that are dealing with pressures that most people don't have to deal with. But there was this automatic reaction to me that I was a cop hater. Well, since I got to sit down with the person, face-to-face communication, and said, no, look, this is my thing. It's a justice thing. Like if I accept the responsibility of police work and potentially having the use of deadly force, I believe that it should be the assumption that that officer is going to protect people from other people and potentially people from their own actions if they're not of sound mind. And once I explained my position, he went, oh, okay, but it's very divisive. It's a very divisive topic, and now we have kind of race going into it. From a perspective of law enforcement, where do you think that there is a problem within the law enforcement community, or do you feel like the law enforcement community is so big that the bad apples are just getting exposed now more and everybody's feeling the heat because of it?
The one thing I think people don't focus on with law enforcement is it's just people. I mean, think about any other profession, lawyers, doctors, any other profession out there. You're going to have good ones and you're going to have bad ones. You have people doing a job, and are bad people going to get in? People that probably shouldn't get in? Yeah. There's bad doctors out there. There's doctors that kill patients all the time. Teachers. How many times, once a month you hear
so many.
Once a month you hear about a teacher, having sex with a student. It's just one of those things. It's what turns, it's what gets the clicks on the news, because it is so. And I think the thing that gets the clicks on the news is because of the badge, because like you said, there should be this standard. And people in the community, I think, are quick to defend, but I think there's more people in the community that will look at situations and say, yeah, that's good, or no, that's not good. And even talking with my friends and stuff, when we see something come up, we're like, hey, what happened here? This doesn't seem right. Or, hey, okay, that seems like a good, decent, that seems like it was a good situation there. They probably did the appropriate use of force, but it's like the thinking that I'm looking at the situation is different than the thinking that you're looking at the situation. And, a lot of times when I look at these videos come out, I'm like, okay, if I'm that officer going, and this is happening to me, how am I going to approach this? And I don't really like to Monday morning quarterback, because so many things happen, and one of the things that I think people don't realize too is, if you see a body camera footage, that body camera is on my chest and is getting crystal clear, 1080p or whatever vision.
1080p.
Yeah. Well, what am I seeing with my eyes?
Right.
And there used to be.
What are you feeling?
Yeah. You know, and the whole situation, you know, what information I got going to the call, you know, what information do I have from this, you know, prior dealing with this suspect or this issue or this person or this area or in general, you know, if this is a certain situation, if I've dealt with it before in this way. There's so many things that happen that just seeing footage is hard to judge it on. And I think we've reached a point where we see the footage and we're like, oh, that's crystal clear. Look, that happened there. It's like, okay, well, X, Y, and Z happened before that. And this is the information they got. You know, we're allowed to look at everything, you know, post and say, hey, well, they should have known better. It's like, well, yeah, in a perfect world, they should have.
Yeah.
But they didn't.
But in the world where this crazy fucking lunatic stabs 3 people, runs around their house, and then comes out and gets shot. And then the news posts this person coming out with a knife, getting shot. And they're like, well, they're 20 or 30 yards away. They didn't have to do that. It's like, well, no, they had to do that.
You know,
but
and
context.
And I think that's the biggest thing is context. And, you know, everyone says, you know, oh, wait, let's wait. And it's nice to wait. But I think making statements during, you know, the problem with everything now is, like you said, everyone has phones. Everyone has, you know, if a situation is going to happen, someone's going to post probably within seconds of that situation happening on Twitter, on Facebook,
or live shit,
or film it live, you know, and we have to, as a community, adapt to that. You know, that's why I like the Columbus one, where they had the officer have the deadly force situation with the females trying to stab the other female. I have never seen body footage come out that quickly, but they had that body footage out within hours.
Why?
And that's the response. The response is because there's 3 different narratives going out, because you had 3 or 4 different people get interviewed or post stories. And it's like, well, no. This is the information. Let's get the actual information out.
Could this be a painful part of change then, where that body footage is coming out right away? It's not being reviewed, and like, and this is where I might be naive and ignorant as well. But if what the people want is a clear, crystal clear view in something fast to, you know, tame any potential fears of abuse or whatever, is that a good thing? Is that part of like painful change in a good direction where the public is getting that footage? Or is that potentially putting situations at risk on or behind the scenes?
I think it can be both.
Okay.
And again, it comes down to context, because if you get the footage out, but you don't, all the facts aren't known about it yet, it could cause more issues. Because
that is a really limited view.
Yes. And the dynamics of that situation, you know, hey, this happened. Okay. Well, what were the dynamics? If you're not getting all the information, which you may not have all the information at the time, you know, it takes a while to develop information. It takes a while to do, you know, casework, you know, interview people, get statements.
Just a video ain't enough.
Just the video is not enough.
Yeah.
But we are so visual people, you know, we see a video and we're like, okay, now I'm making my own judgment. Now I'm making my own.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
That's your objective truth.
It's the truth because it's what I saw.
Right.
You know, and the fact that we're not willing to wait, you know, I think that's something that's going to have to be addressed, but I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Yeah. I don't know if the answer is getting the video out or not getting the video out. You know, it's
situational. I bet.
I guess it's situational. They have a situation in, I think, South or North Carolina where they had another deadly force situation, and apparently there the law is the video doesn't come out, and the family's suing to get the video out.
Sure. Do you think that kind of absolute stance, like we don't give out any video, is reasonable for a public servant?
No, I mean, if you know, we get situations all the time. We're like, well, I'm filming you too.
Yeah,
like
right back at you, baby.
Film me all you want. Like I'm filming you too. You know, so it's like, I know I have a body camera on.
Yeah,
I know everything I'm doing is being recorded. You know, I wear a mic too for my car camera. that's recording my voice. So it's not like one of those things where it's like not in my mind. I know everything I'm doing is being video and audio recorded. Mm-hmm. I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of my actions. You know, if I do something wrong, I do something wrong, and I'm going to have to own up to that. And I'm going to have to deal with what the consequences are. You know, and if I did something egregiously wrong, well, then
there are consequences too. Like
then I need to get a consequence, you know, and I totally agree with that. If I do something wrong, I get a consequence. I'm no different than anyone else. Just because I have a badge and I'm given power does not make me different than you. You know, I'm a human being.
I think there's a perspective in the country right now where they don't think that's the case, where they think that people in law enforcement do think that they're above the law. But what's so important is what you said about every profession. It's a spectrum of people.
Yeah.
You can't take all the people that go to this profession and go, you're all Andy Griffith now.
Yeah.
That's not a realistic situation. But you should be able to, and I think these organizations should be able to hold themselves to a very high standard. So that's kind of a segue to how we know each other. Yep. I've believed for a long time that law enforcement should or could definitely benefit from ongoing hand-to-hand training, thinking that if a huge part of their job is the apprehension and control of subjects, potentially violent subjects, they should know the best way, or at least be proficient in immobilizing these people. A guy I trained with back in the day, Tom Grubb from CRPD, he was a mixed martial artist, wrestler all the way throughout his childhood as well. Became a mixed martial artist and would constantly talk about it's so much more easy to do the job because of what I know that I'm capable of doing. So I got first-hand reports from him early in my martial arts journey that this was beneficial to police work. Yeah. And there have been many departments and many law enforcement agencies adopting for their training now, especially now after recent events. Yeah. What was your experience? So I opened up the gym for law enforcement to come in here and get 3 months. This was in response to George Floyd, which I want to talk about that case in specific, because that was about the catalyst for when this all started taking place in our gym. And from your perspective as an officer with some combat footage or some combat experience with wrestling and things, judo, what was this experience like for you coming into the gym and continuing this training? How did it help you? And what would you say to other officers who might say, I don't need this. We have a strong police department. I know what I'm doing. It's not necessary.
I had wrestling and judo experience, and I had confidence in my abilities, but even still, it was always kind of like one of those questioning. It was like, okay, well, you know, I can hit a double leg on most people. But it's like, well, that guy's a little big over there. I don't know if I can really hit a double leg on him. You know,
most people you would. Most people you'd be fine with. Yeah.
And my keys. So I was like, okay, well, this could be a little bit of a fun scrap here if something went sideways. I was like, okay, and it was kind of like I had the experience of the academy with their defensive tactics, and I ended up actually going down and becoming an instructor in the defensive tactics. So I'm an instructor for my department. And going through that, you're like, there's something more here. Like, there's something more we can do, because it's like, this is not, you can't tell me this is just it and this is going to work. And so I was looking for something, you know, and I listened to a lot of podcasts, and I was wanting to get into the game because I was like, I think I could get into this jiu-jitsu stuff. I think that was help out, and
it's fun.
It's fun. I mean, it gets me back on the mats and stuff, and I think I like it. And coming in here and I think the first day I was here, I think you said, well, yeah, you don't have to roll. And I was like, no, man, I'm good. I'll doing some shrimping and learning some, okay, this is half guard. Yeah, I'm like, I've watched enough MMA. I know what half guard is. I'm like, I get it, you know.
It's done.
And then
to quote our coach, I'm done.
And then like that first day I was like, okay, well, I'm going to roll. What's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to tap out. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I don't remember who I rolled with first, but I remember grabbing someone that is rolling and be like, what am I doing? Like, it's like I literally would get, I'm like, okay, well, I'm here. And I have some judo experience where I'm like, okay, well, I know I can go for this armbar and I know I can go for this choke, but I'm like, they're grabbing me and I don't know really what I'm doing.
What I should focus on. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was kind of like, okay, I really don't know anything at this point. I need to do this. And it was that I went home from that and I told my wife, I was like, yeah, I'm hooked. I'm like,
some people just know.
And it's just, I think it's just, if you're a grappler, you're a grappler.
Yeah.
Like, taking time away. And then once you get back on the mat, you're like, yep, I'm back. Mm-hmm. And then doing this it was so new and it was so different. And it's, in judo, you do some of the groundwork, but not nearly to the extent that this is. And it was, to me, it was like, okay, I need to know more about this. Like this is like a 3D chess game going on. And it's just so fascinating to me. Like, okay, well, if I move this way and I'm trying to get you to this position, how am I going to do that? Well, you're doing that. I don't want you to do that. Now, how do I get you back to this position? And coming in and learning that, and then the progress that has been over, the last 11 months at this point, my confidence and just being out there, being on the streets and being, a lot of times I'm by myself. I could tell you my confidence increased, and it wasn't the fact that like, hey, I can go out and tap anyone out right now. It's like, no, I know if a situation happens, I have some skills and I've been practicing those skills and I feel pretty confident in some of those skills. And I know that if this goes down, I can do this. So I have that in the back of my mind. And it's like, now I don't have to rely on something else. I don't have to sit there and go into this call and say, hey, oh crap, if this goes down, I don't know what's going to happen here. Would you have said that you were confident before though? Like, would you have said that, because this is what I think could happen in a situation where you have wrestling and you have judo, which are very competent martial arts, mm-hmm. especially for the act of subduing people and controlling positions. It would be easy to go, oh yeah, I'm confident, and be potentially like now slipping over to the overconfident place where you're telling yourself you're confident, but you don't know that you're confident. You don't know that you can apply these skills. I think that's a lot of it. I think because when I came in here that first day and all of a sudden I was like, oh, I really don't know what I'm doing here.
Fish out of water in certain situations.
It was like, okay. And then my mind was like, well, I've been operating under this idea. Like, hey, this,
I don't know what to do with my hands.
I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to get in a big Greco-Roman wrestling match. And I'm going to be fine.
Yep.
Or I'm going to hit you with,
everything's going to happen precisely the way the universe has aligned it.
I'm going to hit you with this perfect Ippon Seoi-nage and it will be amazing. And it's like, no.
And then the ref's going to jump in.
Yep. Ippon, we're good. No, it was like, I really don't know. And it was like, I had this skill level before and I've had this belief and it's like, no. Mm-hmm. And even now it's like, I have this confidence in my ability, but even still I'm like, okay, well, you're like 6'2", 230, 240. Like, okay, this is going to be definitely interesting if this goes down and this gets sideways. And it's like, okay, well,
glad I got Bruno on the team to roll with me every once in a while.
But it's like, I think that has taken, it allows you to see reality, mm-hmm. And I think too many of us get into this and we have this oversense of, hey, my prior skills, or hey, I did this 10 years ago in high school. It's like, if you're not competent and you're not training and you're not practicing and you're not doing this on a daily basis or a weekly basis, where does your competency go?
Well, it comes to that, what you were talking about again, it comes down to like, what does that mean? Does it mean that you kind of wrestled a little bit in middle school or high school and then you quit? Or were you one of these kids that trained from 5 to 18 and got burned out, mm-hmm. and have this really solid set of base somewhere in there? There's a huge spectrum. It just kind of depends on every person. But one thing that I remember after you'd been here for a while, and something that really stuck with me, is all of these stories about police brutality that have been kind of pumped in our face lately. you came in and we were having a conversation, and you said something about how at a point where you may have thought about potentially drawing your weapon, you thought about the potential publicity of it.
Yeah.
Right. And and at the very worst time.
Yep.
So talk to me a little bit about just that experience and why it sucks in your position, and why it's, in my opinion, like there's victims on both sides of this thing. There's good cops who are having to suffer in their own police work because of the action of a few bad cops. And there's people who, because of a few bad cops, are suffering as well. So talk to me about that experience, and talk to me about kind of like how you have to sometimes question yourself because of the way things are perceived.
You know, in that kind of situation, it was the split second that typically we have. You know, if the unfortunate reality that we live in now is that when I operate in that split second, I'm making I've been granted this power to make this life or death decision. And I have these powers, and I have these things that the state tells me I have to do, and society is telling me I have to do. And I am now, because of how other situations are going on, I am now actively thinking about, okay, is there someone over there videotaping this? Is the lighting correct that my camera is going to get everything? Did I follow every single policy in line, so that if this is a bad situation, or if this was a good situation, that I can't get in trouble because I messed up on one policy, you know, because the city is going to be looking after the city. And if you mess up on a policy, you mess up on a policy, you know. And it's having that happen. And when that did happen, it kind of was like, I never thought I would be thinking stuff like that. You know, I've always operated under, okay, if something happens, it happens, you know, and I have to assess the situation as is. And all of a sudden it's like, boom. Oh, and I mean, when I got done with it, I had to take a few minutes of be like, huh, you know. And I don't know if it was the fact that, you know, we're actively seeing these things happen all the time and pumping stuff in our face. And, you know, you see the videos come out, and you see these stories come out, and you see these big situations come out.
Well, it has to.
It's like,
it's not like you can shut that out.
You know, and I've taken a when situations happen, I'll, you know, obviously I see it because I'm a member of social media, but I typically don't really get too involved in, you know, a big situation coming out. I let it happen for a day or two, and then let the kind of information kind of shuffle out. And then all of a sudden, then I'll be like, okay, now I'll look into what's kind of going on, because I don't want to get sucked into that right away.
You're trying to make an informed decision, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
It seems logical.
Because, you know, I mean, we can get, you know, the algorithms are going to give us what we want to see, you know, and my social media, because I follow certain people and I read certain stories, are going to give me algorithms that are probably going to be skewed towards my views.
Law enforcement, yeah.
Versus I want to see what everyone else, you know, what the other side, quote unquote, is talking about. I want to see what, you know, the law enforcement side is talking about. I want to see what the press is talking about. I want to understand the whole picture and be like, okay, now I understand the situation. So I kind of try to take a little bit of a hands-off approach on it.
But the point is, in a critical point,
it's now affecting me. The fact that
what people don't know is that it's seconds.
Yep.
It's maybe a second, maybe it's half a second.
Oh,
Same as jiu-jitsu. You make a mistake and you pay dearly for it. Well, in your line of work, that could, and oftentimes for officers across the country, is their life.
Mm-hmm.
So you sitting here in this moment where you've been empowered with this decision to potentially save others, or save multiple people, you're tasked with this responsibility. And in this moment, you're having to question yourself unwittingly, unconsciously, about the potential ramifications. Yeah. And what people don't know is that will kill you.
It 100% will kill you.
That's a thrust. That's a shot or two shots.
You know, and it's not only that, it's also, do I draw a taser or do I draw a gun?
Mm-hmm.
Do I draw a baton? Do I use the misappropriated use of force for that situation? And you see these situations where they're like, oh, well, they shot too quickly. They didn't understand the situation. Well, they had a millisecond.
You don't understand this.
They had a millisecond to understand and process that information. We will always be behind the curve. You talk about how everything operates. You operate, and then I'm reacting. I'm always going to be behind the curve.
Mm-hmm.
You're always going to get the jump on me if you are reacting versus me reacting. So now I have to somehow make up that gap. So I'm either saving my life, or I'm saving someone else's life, or I'm making sure that this use of force is appropriate. Well, if I'm behind that curve, how do I make that gap up? Mm-hmm. There's certain situations that you're never going to make that gap up. You're going to just react, and you're going to have to react the best you can.
The misconception of the public, and even myself in the past, what's the rule of thumb to draw if somebody with a deadly weapon gets within X amount of feet? Like, I know there is the
21-foot rule, that
21 foot,
and that one's kind of been debunked a little bit.
Well, here's what I thought about
hasn't
that
been
21-foot rule back in the day when I didn't really know anything, and when it was easy for me to just make accusations. 21 feet. That's like,
Yeah.
Here's me in jiu-jitsu perspective. 21 feet. That's like,
oh yeah,
that's across the country in jiu-jitsu terms. I'm going to have all the time to do that. Well, that's me. And then when I watch actual video, like multiple videos, I see that 21 feet can be bridged incredibly quickly. Depending on what kind of conditions, whether you have something at your back, whether you can even draw your weapon. I see people going to draw their weapon, being rushed back, tripping over their own feet, falling victim to circumstance. It happens so fast. Now after I watch this, I go, oh yeah, 20, maybe like 30.
Yeah.
Maybe 30 feet.
Well, it's that reaction. It's the same thing with jiu-jitsu. If I'm going to do a super hardcore pressure pass on you, and you're not prepared for it, all of a sudden I start doing this pressure pass on you. You're like, oh,
you get ahead.
I'm ahead of that curve then, and now you have to react to that. Mm-hmm. And think of how many times someone does like a sudden athletic movement on you. All of a sudden, someone shoots a double leg. Well, you're sprawling. Well, if they've have that split second of I have my arms fully wrapped on your legs, my head's in a good position, my hips are in. Have fun sprawling.
Yeah,
you're
run right through you.
They're going to run right through you. If Jordan Burroughs hits you with a blast double, you're on your back.
Yeah.
There's very few people that have that reaction time that can say, oh, okay, I can get to that. And then now take that onto a situation where you may have gotten limited information from dispatch. You may have gotten good information. It doesn't know, because the problem with that is you're the caller calling in, providing the information to them, which provides the information to me.
Right.
So it's kind of depending on how much information the caller gives the dispatch to give me.
Yeah.
So I may have limited information, I may have good information. I go into a high tense, high volatile situation, and all of a sudden it goes south. Now I have all these things compiling, and I'm trying to intake all this data, interpret this data, and come up with a course of action. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about seconds.
Yeah. So to paint a picture, the nightly news reports, instance of police brutality here, blah, 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 blah. Unarmed man was shot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's what people get. Mm-hmm. Then the video comes out.
But I'll take you, and this is kind of, it's not really a pet peeve, but in any situation with just any individual and a police officer, is there a gun?
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
There's always a gun in the situation, right? Because the cop or the police officer has a gun. So you could be unarmed, but there's always a firearm in that situation.
Yeah, in the actual.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of annoys me a little bit, was they're always like unarmed. I'm like, okay, well,
and
they may be unarmed, but there's always a gun in the situation.
That's where I'm going with this. Is that's what they see.
Yep.
They see the video of the unarmed person laying on the ground or shot, and they start forming their opinions. Mm-hmm. What they don't know is there was this data that was funneled down through 2 or 3 mediums and then interpreted by the police officer as they're arriving. And what might trickle through the filter of information are the most key points. And the most key points is this guy has a warrant out for his arrest for violent behavior. He's known to be involved in this situation, in that situation. And he hasn't presented a gun in public view, but he's acting as if he has a gun.
Yep.
That's a totally different situation. If it was presented in the news like that, this person who had warrants out for his arrest for beating his old lady and shooting somebody 3 years ago, whatever the case may be, then people would go, oh, yeah, well, he was like threatening, so like I could see it. But that's not what they're given. They're given the window.
Yep.
And they're framing this whole perspective on it. And the thing that's interesting to me is I've went on 2 or 3 ride-alongs in my life. High school, I did 1 or 2. And then I did one just recently with a guy here in local at CRPD. Nothing really happened. We went out on St. Patty's Day, and there were some interesting stories and a lot of drunks and things like that, but nothing crazy hot went down. But I still got it better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I still understood on a better level how things can go south. And here's my advice to anybody who's a self-professed cop hater. Go on a ride-along.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just go on a ride-along. If you can't do that, then you're not really embracing an open perspective. You're limiting yourself to this point of view and whatever you're kind of handed or shovel.
Well, and I think that gets back to we have lost the idea of dissent, of being able to talk to people. And, even in situations that I deal with is trying to talk, the majority of my job is communication. Is how can I communicate with you? He's like, I am called to the situation, and there's always 2 sides, 3 sides, 4 sides, 5 sides to every story.
Sure.
And I have to figure out the truth, and I have to figure out, was there a law that was violated? Is there a victim of a crime? All that stuff. When I have you telling me a side, I have someone else telling me a side, I have maybe this witness over here saying something, and it's like, okay, how can I effectively communicate? And now I'm communicating with someone that may not be rationally thinking because they called me and it's probably the worst day of their life. If it's either a medical emergency or they may be a victim of a crime or they may be a perpetrator of a crime.
It's not good.
It's probably the worst day of their life. So now you're trying to talk to someone in a irrational state and you're trying to communicate what happened, how it happened, what's going on in this giant situation. And I have other people trying to say their side of the story. You have so much data flowing at you. And if you can't process that, that's when I think we start having breakdowns is when when people can't be processing that information. And, you have so much information coming at you and
a lot of it's bullshit, right? Like not all of it, but sometimes you're going to be given information from people that is not valid in any way.
100%
could potentially end up being hazardous.
100%. But there's a lot of times in situations where, just think about if you've like the worst situation you've ever been in your life, how you were thinking, what important information to you at that point in time might not be important information in general.
True.
People pick up on different things, and especially if it's a personal crime, if it's, an assault or domestic violence, something like that, where there's an actual victim to this crime, you're going to be sitting there and you may be picking up on something. It might be the most important thing that you thought. To me, trying to prove that this crime occurred, it might not be something I really need. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to get this other, did this happen? Did they have a weapon? Did this go on? I'm trying to get that from you, and you can't get off of that. And it's, how can I communicate with you to get you to give me that information?
Right.
And I think in the profession, what people don't understand is that's what our job is. Our job is to try to communicate with you. How do we effectively do that?
Do you think that, like jiu-jitsu training, I think what is great about jiu-jitsu training is like the interpersonal, the philosophical, the conversations that happen after or before. Do you think that there is a possibility of benefit for literally interpersonal communication skills in law enforcement?
100%.
Like just part of our continued education is teaching you how to deal with somebody who's under the influence of meth, like if you can, if there's a way that you can, right? Like we've cracked the code. But just ongoing trainings like that, I feel like in situations where you have this tight camaraderie or brotherhood, there's sometimes a reluctance to accept ongoing education.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that potentially stems from the ego, where
Yep.
we don't need it. We know what we're doing. This
Yep.
is our job. This is what.
Well, it's you get hold up. I mean, and I see it where we are part of a community, and the life of a law enforcement officer is very different than the life of just
Normal citizen.
I wouldn't say civilian because
Normal
yeah.
citizen. One of those normals. One of those
But-
peasant class. Yes.
I believe that you're off duty, but you're never off duty. If I'm out in public and I see something going on, my skill, my training, and my job, I took an oath. I have a duty to respond to something. That doesn't mean I have to jump up and freak out. If my duty is to call the police at that point, that's my duty. But
Shout out to the off-duty police officers,
Yeah.
because they've saved some people's shit.
Yeah.
Legit. Many.
Yes.
An off-duty police officer literally stopped this.
But
It happens.
But I think there's this tendency that we get in these communities, and we hole off in these communities, and we don't tend to expand out of these communities. And it's like most of the people I hang out with are not police officers. I kind of, when I got into this late in life. And
You're
I think
more mature and just kind of.
And I think one of my big things was I don't want to get hold into that community where I'm just kind of stuck in that community. I want to be able to expand and still have influences and still talk to people outside. And I hang out with police officers, but the majority of the people I hang out with aren't police officers, because when I get done with work, I don't want to just sit there and all of a sudden be talking about work. If we're hanging out and it's our day off, I don't want to talk about work.
I feel the same way about martial arts. Like I talk about it all day.
Yeah.
I do it all day.
Yeah.
So when I'm done with the day, I maybe watch basketball.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like appreciate some other kind of medium, but
I think that just helps us stay connected, though. Like if we get so compartmentalized in that into our own little individual sections. You can say that about education. If you're a teacher and you just hang out with teachers all day, and that you're in the school and you're not doing anything outside of it, you're not doing volunteer work with a church group, or you're not doing a martial arts class or a fitness class where you get exposed to and you hang out with other people from other walks of life and other occupations.
It's a slippery slope, because now I feel an allegiance or an honor to this smaller group of people and their limited perspective, which means I'm going to be more likely with ego to further their and my own progress, and not the progress of the greater good.
Yeah.
I believe it to be a remnant of tribalism,
Yes,
of tribal
100%.
behavior. I need to adhere to this group, and my hope for 2020, 2021 was that we had kind of broken free of the chains of tribalism, and we've been proven lately that they're very strong. They're very, very strong.
But we have so much pumping at us with the tribalism
to make us more tribal. Yeah.
You have to be this, you have to be this. If you're this, you have to believe in this. And it's like, no, I am who I am. And I may have friends over here. I may have friends that do this. I may have people over here. And I want to take all of that information and input all of that information and then make my opinions and make my decisions. But it's the more I can expand that and the more I can open myself up to everything else. It's, and then social media is just pumping that in our face, saying, hey, with those algorithms, because, hey, I might have looked at this website and now it's tracking my websites that I'm looking at, and it's saying, hey, let's pump these ads towards them, or these articles.
Weird. That's weird to me.
I just updated my phone.
It's weird.
And I noticed when I just updated my phone, I got 2 messages right away. It was like, so-and-so app wants permission to track your stuff on when you're off. And I'm like, no.
Why?
So I click no. And then all of a sudden I got another one. And I'm like, why would my workout app want to track where I'm going and what I'm looking at?
So it knows where to sell shit.
Exactly. But it's like, it's again, it gets back to, well, we have all this information. Why are we holding ourselves up?
We have all this information. We have no connection.
Yeah. We are the most informed we have ever been as a society.
Yeah.
I can pick up my phone right now and read pretty much any book I ever wanted to read and find out anything I ever wanted to. There's probably a website or a Facebook page or Instagram post or something.
Yeah.
But people are choosing to wall off. And we're not choosing to use that resource.
Well, and I think that part of this, this is just my personal opinion. Technology has grown at such an exponential rate that I feel like what we're seeing now is this era where algorithms and technological growth are getting to a point where they're actually manipulating human behavior because of our likelihood of tribalism, because of our likelihood to respond more instinctively towards urges, sex, food, survival, so on.
Do you see that? What was that Netflix one that they had out about the social
dilemma? Yeah. And so a lot of the writers of these algorithms don't even know what direction they're going after they write them. And furthermore, you are imprinting, you're using technology in a technology that not everybody that even anybody understands in a whole, and allowing it to drive social decisions, social behavior, ultimately the way people spend their time. And most of it is built, as I understand it, for marketing, marketing products and selling shit. And I've had a huge issue with this ever since 9/11 and the Patriot Act and the collection of consumer data in mass at NSA centers, and people would look at me and go, "Oh, you're a conspiracy." No, it's true. Like, it's out there. They don't even hide it. But that's what it's weird to be in a time to grow up in a time like the 80s and 90s where something like the book 1984 was an Orwellian nightmare, and now it's just reality. It's just cameras everywhere, Big Brother watching, Big Brother admitting that Big Brother is watching, us paying politicians essentially to track, monitor, and force feed us shit. Yeah. Through mass media and social media. I feel like mass media destroyed culture in society, or is trying to in mass, and social media is destroying image of self. It's completely self-absorbing people and leading people. I don't think there's any coincidence to link mental illness epidemics and rise with the rise of social media and technology.
I think back to when I was a kid. My parents are both very well educated. My mom was a nurse. My dad's an electrical engineer. Probably the smartest person I've ever met in my entire life. I mean, just a brilliant person. But we'd be eating dinner. My dad was always, a card-carrying Republican, and my mom was a Democrat. And I think back,
balance.
Yeah. But I think back to them talking about it. I mean, they would talk about politics when we were kids, and it wasn't, well, my guy said this, and this is what it is. It was talking about issues, and then you could see the ones. My dad would say something, my mom would say something, and they would go back and forth, and it was just kind of approaching that. And I think that's being raised like that, being able to see that there are multiple sides of issues. You can have a conversation about an issue about, quote unquote, the other side.
That's the point.
And
it's like the whole point is so that everybody can have a side and argue their points.
But I think that's how I was raised. And I think that's how I approach things, because that's how I was raised. And I know, with my wife, my wife's not very political. And, I know I like listening to, like the political podcast, because it's, to me, I view it as kind of comedy, like, especially like the national politics. Cause it's like, this is hilarious. Like, you guys can't figure out how to talk to each other.
I think that our culture is terrified. I think it's been terrified since 9/11.
Yeah.
It's been bred to be fearful of Y2K, 9/11, terrorism, now viruses. And, they're so terrified and they're so unfulfilled that all they can really do to find meaning in their life is to adhere allegiance to a color, a donkey or an elephant, a Democrat or Republican Party. And here's the jam: like, When I was 6, I knew that politics were full of shit.
Yeah.
I knew that politics were a 4-letter word. People told me, oh, it's political. What does that mean? Well, there's a bunch of issues that don't really adhere to this subject or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, why do we do that? Nobody knows. Why are you a Democrat? Because I believe this. What about their issues as a Republican? Well, they're wrong.
Well, I know.
It's just like, it's so easily explained to me as tribalism and as intellectual laziness, a way for me to go, my ideologies are reddish in color, and that this animal family member represents our party, and I'm one of these guys.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, that's so simplistic.
Yep.
It's drawing a line in the sand where you're supposed to meet and talk, but now people are just getting further and further away from the sand.
I know I've had to over the last couple of years, because my son's getting older, and he's asked questions about certain situations, because I'm sure they're talking in school, and it's like, I may have this opinion, but I want to make sure that he understands that there is multiple sides. So I will maybe explain my side, but then I'll explain the other side to him, because I don't want him looking at me and saying, well, this is what Dad thinks. This must be right. No, I may think I'm right, but it's up to you to make your choice in life. And, that's one thing my parents were, I'm blessed that my parents, essentially, the three of us, they let us choose our paths, and there wasn't very many things that were pushed on us, because it was, hey, yeah, you can go make your own path. And how are you going to make your own path, and how are you going to learn?
Yeah.
And I that's something I hold dear, that I want to put on my kids is, just because I say something or I do something or I believe in something doesn't mean you need to.
Right. Well, and to that point, with information changing so fast now, I have to be able to admit to myself that the information I have, limited as it is compared to what you get, might not be complete enough to tell your story. But the point is, your parents and my parents both recognized that and went, no. Specifically and implicitly, do not just adhere to what I say.
Yeah.
Go find the secrets. My mom did this even with religion. Most people are fanatical about religion, and they're afraid that if you don't adhere to their religion, you're going to burn in hell for all of eternity.
Oh.
She went, no, go read stuff. Go read about Jesus. Go read about Muhammad. Make sure that this is the right call. Do not make this choice to be our religion unless you do it of sound mind and heart. And I ended up not adhering to that religion, but I ended up taking some things away from that religion that I took seriously that I wouldn't have taken seriously if I was forced.
Yeah.
And as a rebellious person, if I would have been forced to, I would have rejected it even unreasonably anyway.
Yeah.
So having that kind of open-mindedness opens up the doors for our children to open up the doors for their children. But I feel like most of the troublemakers in society today are people who are brought up traumatized in positive or negative ways towards a certain ideology and shamed for thinking any other ideology. Oh, what are you, some kind of Democrat, liberal? What are you, some stupid Republican? So they identify with that which makes them comfortable, which is in no way noble, is no way moral or even just. And to be 2021 now and see people more polarized and divided between the Democratic and Republican Party, which don't bear any resemblance to how they started, it just blows my mind.
Yeah.
And I don't have anybody trying to explain to me why or how, as a 6-year-old kid, I saw politics for what it was, and I'm still seeing it for what it was. We have the capacity to change this. We just have to change it. We have to insist upon it, in my opinion.
Bringing that back to kind of law enforcement too, it's the more open-minded that I can approach situations, I feel that, me personally, I feel that, when I go into situations that I've had this experience, that I have this upbringing, and how I approach myself and my family, it helps me understand stuff more, because then I can say to people, okay, I understand this, how you're feeling. You may have done something that is against the law, but I can empathize with you. And I can say, yeah, that sucks, man. But this is the kind of consequence that has to happen. And and I was telling my one buddy the other day, I was like, the fact that I can empathize with people, and I can talk to them about it, and they can tell I'm sincere with how I'm talking to them and communicating with them, typically they're most of the people are like, yeah, they don't want to go to jail, but they're like, oh,
Thanks.
yeah, I get it. I mean, this sucks. You know, I'm like, yeah, I get it.
You're a real person.
Yeah.
Because you were a teacher once, and you saw cyclical generational issues and poverty, and you can talk about that in a way that's so genuine to them, they can't deny its truth.
Well, and I think one of the big things is that I've got into this late. You know, I didn't get into this till I was like 30 or 31. I forgot.
That is a pretty important thing.
You know, and having the life experience and having those, you know, I love my wife and we've had our ups and downs. You know, we've had fights and we've had those situations where you're really hot and heated at each other. So if you go into a domestic situation and they're hot and heated, well, maybe you can empathize with them a little bit more, you know, or, you know, you're in your traffic stop and, hey, you didn't pay your registration. Well, I'm having a hard time with money right now. Okay. I get that. I've been there. I've had hard times with money.
Empathy.
You know, it's showing empathy to people and being genuine and honest about it.
A lack of empathy, I think, is one of the problems, one of the key problems, because there's no empathy, or there's not due empathy in directions like, you know what, that officer they had a really rough go of it.
Yeah.
They got into the force when they were 18 or 19 or 20, and they're coming from a totally different perspective than you are, and there's no empathy for what's going on psychologically. You're just going badge, uniform.
Well, they just don't have the life experience, you know, and there are great officers I've seen that got into this at a young game.
Sure.
You know, and they've been able to mature and understand and
they came
grow
from their own unique and potentially grounded
you know, and
experience.
I've seen other officers in other agencies and that it's like, well, you could tell that this attitude about, hey, I have a badge, I'm in charge. Mm-hmm. And yes, I'm in charge of the situation when I'm called there, but I can talk myself into a fight a lot easier than I can talk myself out of a fight.
Mm-hmm.
And it's harder to talk myself out of a fight, but you know what? I'd rather talk myself out of that fight and not have to deal with that and deal with the consequences, because at any point in a fight, I can get punched and it could be done.
Yeah.
You know, and I think
people don't know that.
Well, and I think people don't know that because they're not doing it. They're not actively training. They're not actively doing something to say, hey, this is not a good situation to be fighting. Like, I should not be fighting. Mm-hmm. You know, how can I talk myself out of this so we can maybe have a better result for you, for me, for everyone here.
Right.
You know, and there's certain situations where, you know, this has to happen. Okay, well, this has to happen. I know what the outcome has to be. You know, you have to be put in cuffs and you have to go to jail. Well, I can get really big and bully, and next thing you know, you're going to be challenging me, and then we're going to just escalate. Or I can say, hey, come over here, man. Let me talk to you.
De-escalate.
You know, hey, this is going on. This happened. I get it. Let's just get this done. You know, we'll put you in cuffs. We'll go take care of this. You'll see the judge. Well, you can get this done.
It sucks. I'm sorry for your situation.
You know, am I still in charge of the situation? Yeah. If he escalates, can I still escalate? Yeah, 100%. But if I can talk myself out of having to go hands-on or use a tool or something like that.
That's the art of arts.
You know, that's that verbal judo. That's that.
If you can diffuse violence with your words, you're a bad man, in my opinion.
You know, Tim Kennedy shared a story about how he was at a bar and some guy came up and tried to get in a fight with him.
No shit.
Yes. I'm like, first of all, whoever's trying to pick a fight with whoever's trying to pick a fight with Tim Kennedy probably needs to go check themselves into a hospital.
They're all over the place.
I know, but
I know you know.
But he was like, could I have mopped this guy up in 2 seconds? Yeah. Mm-hmm. The guy dumped like a beer on his head or something. Tim bought him another beer and said, hey, here's a beer. It's like he understands the consequence of violence.
Yeah.
You know, and
the consequence of love, it sounds like, as well,
yeah.
Because it makes people look like fools when you're, you know, like, this is something that all the great teachers of history have said and have taught. If you have somebody who hates you and you love them, in very simple terms, they look dumb.
Yeah.
They look like fools. They're outed as the corrupted. And so just empathy.
Yep.
Just affording people empathy and going, you're in your own thing, and it goes all the way back to the day that you arrived here. And I can understand that. And based on my communication, based on the data, limited or otherwise, I've gotten about this situation, things probably ain't great for you, and they probably haven't been great for you. And I get that. There's a humanness to that where I believe somebody even from the furthest reaches of your perspective in life experience can go, okay, well, if you can not treat me like shit, if you can treat me like a human being, even at a weak point in time, I'll have just enough empathy for you to not try to be violent with you. And that's something that could cure the world, and something that I feel like egos on both sides and damage and trauma and circumstance kind of prevent us from getting to at this point.
I think that with that empathy comes the confidence and training that we were talking about earlier, because I know I have this ability. Now I can focus on empathy because I have that in the back of my mind. That if you escalate, I can escalate.
It's like an ace in the hole. Yeah.
Yes. And I do, that's not something that has to be my go-to. I don't have to be big and bully to be my go-to. You know, I can now really focus on that, being empathetic, talking to you, communicating with you, versus having to, hey, I have to control everything.
Do you think jiu-jitsu mandatory for law enforcement? Not mandatory like every day, like they have to adopt it to the spirit that you and some of the other officers in law enforcement have here, but some mandatory consistent training. Do you feel like it would affect officer-related incidents where they had to potentially use lethal force? Do you think that you would see, with a nationwide expectation, would you see a sharp decline in those events?
I think so, but I go back and forth on this because making it mandatory, just knowing what I know about the community, you're not going to have people buy in. You're going to have people go through the motions, you know. And I think I was listening, and this is kind of random, but I was listening to John Donaher on Lex Friedman's, and he was talking about how
I've been told by like 3 people.
Oh God, it's
to listen to that. I love Donaher too, so I'll check it out.
It's amazing, but just make sure you have like 2 bangs with you because like both those guys, how they talk, you're going to fall asleep.
Yeah.
But he was talking about drilling. He's like, I never drill for numbers, and I never tell guys to drill for numbers. Not, hey, go hit 10 of these. Hey, go hit 10 of these, and focus on what's important and how to get better with drilling. Yes. And that's how I look about with training. If I tell you that you have to do this, you're not going to. There's going to be a percentage of people say, okay, let's go. There's going to be a percentage of people that says, all right, I'll do it. And they may turn into the, okay, let's do it. But and then you're going to have a percentage of people that says, fuck this. This is stupid. I'm showing up because I have to show up.
They're making me do this. I should be doing the things I know I should be doing. But
they're not going to get anything out of it. And then you're always going to have that percentage of people that don't want to do it and that don't see any benefit in it. And do I think it's going to help situations? Yes, 100%. I think that if we make it mandatory and we make some level of understanding of combatives mandatory with consistent training, not just training, consistent training, you're going to see a dramatic decrease in even use of tools.
Injuries, stuff
I think
like
that. Taser use would go down. I think OC use would go down. I think, you don't really see baton use anymore because no one really uses batons, but all of those would go down. But you have to have that level of consistency with it. Just because you do a training once a year or twice a year or 3 times a year, and that you go out and someone shows these moves and you drill them, but if you're not drilling that and you're not practicing that, you're not making an actual attempt to understand the
how and why
dynamics of it, it's not going to have any effect.
Especially in the moment.
Yeah.
Of great stress.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like you can't think at that point. You just have to do it.
One thing I started doing, I started implementing live action training, just role playing training. And at first we did role playing training full gear. I was the bad guy because I can control that situation and I can control how violent I want that situation to be. It worked pretty well. I think guys got a glimpse on, okay, well, this didn't work out. Okay, this worked out. Okay, maybe I need to work on this over here. But they got that glimpse. And then we escalated it. We added simunitions, which is essentially a paintball round. Looks like a real gun. Bullets look the same, except it's paintball round and it hurts. So we added a consequence, a real consequence. If you screw up and I pull that gun and I shoot you, it's going to hurt. There's that real consequence.
You gotta learn. You gotta learn.
But we did that, and people, the response I got from people was amazing. They're like, "This is bad. This was an amazing training."
Yeah, because it's real, right?
Because it's real. But then they got to feel me having that level of violence and controlling that level of violence with them. But hey, there's this level of consequence. It's not these red guns where we go bang, yeah, you got me, haha.
Right.
No, now it's you go bang and oh, you got me. That would have been me going to the hospital, maybe me dying.
Yeah. No half guard if you've got a bullet.
Yeah. And I think that training is more valuable than any training I could have done. And I've gotten an amazing response from it from the guys I worked with, and they're like, yeah, that was great training.
That's awesome.
And I think the more you can do that with guys, and then have them see, and then
have them feel,
and the debrief afterwards. Hey, how I was doing this. What were you thinking? What were you feeling? What were you going to try to do? And then I can say, well, I can let you know that if you would have done this, I would have, turned around and got a body lock on you, or I would have done this, I would have done that. Mm-hmm. And then seeing the process in their mind go, oh,
it's not that simple.
Oh,
yeah.
I think doing that, and then on top of having, a program like yours, and then that's when you can come in with your program and be like, hey guys, you can come down here and get this training. They can now see it. They felt it, and they go, "Oh, I have a deficiency.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't take long.
This did not work out well.
Yeah.
Now what am I going to do to address that deficiency? Okay, hey, you want to train? I got you can come here for jits. You can come here to work out. You can so on. Get the guys that information, and I think you're going to have a natural osmosis of people saying, okay."
Yeah.
And then
you need their buy-in, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But then you're going to have that percentage of people like, yeah, let's go train. Go way up versus, hey, make it mandatory.
Right. Well, get their buy-in. Just make it a cultural thing. Yeah. So last thing I want to talk about. So law enforcement, the enforcement of laws. There's an argument made by many about just laws, about victimless laws. If you could... or had the opportunity to reform the system or the structure, the practice of law, from your perspective in education, law enforcement, what would you change, if anything?
What would I change?
Yeah. What laws do you think that we currently deal with are unjust, if any? How do you think our justice system misappropriates time? How do you think the system could be more efficient and more just? Because I think that should be the ultimate goal, I would think, of the justice system is making things more just. Yep. And because of bureaucracy and bullshit, just like you get any time in life, that doesn't always happen. And right now, we have many, many people in jail. Many of them are violent offenders and probably should be incarcerated. But do you think there's a better way to incarcerate them? Do you think, I know there's other countries like Scandinavian countries that have this really wildly popular reform system in their prisons, but that's a different culture too. That's a completely different society. What kind of holes do you see in the justice system? And what, if anything, would you do to change or fix them if I gave you tyrannical power?
That's the whole thing with the laws and stuff. Do I personally believe that there's laws out there that should be changed? Probably, but that's something that, that's my personal belief, and everyone's going to have their own personal beliefs on that, and I'm not paid enough money or smart enough to change those laws to make them work for everybody. Cause that's another issue is, if you change a law, are you making it work for a small group, or are you making it work for the group as a whole?
Yeah. Is it retro?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I don't know about that. Within the criminal justice system itself, there are a lot of issues that need to be worked on. I'll be the first to admit that. Once I hand someone off and I've done my part and I've done my investigation and I say, here, this is what, I believe that this crime occurred and this happens. Mm-hmm. I'm technically done until it's their time to defend themselves. Mm-hmm. Once it gets to that side of the house, they have so many issues on that side of the house dealing with how that process works out, and is it fair and just for people of different socioeconomic backgrounds? From what I've seen in the news, it seems like people with a higher socioeconomic level have different accesses.
Better legal teams.
They have different accesses, and they seem to have different abilities. I don't know that for a fact. But I can just from what I've seen.
Yeah. There's so many examples where you have people of affluence just skating on by that something where somebody else would have had the key thrown away basically on them.
So I would really focus on that. I would focus on how, but I don't know how you fix that. I don't know how you.
That's hard too, right? Because of the same reasons.
Yeah.
People are people.
People are
and
people.
The people that are embedded in that justice system they come with their same prejudices, their same stereotypes, their same preconceived notions as everybody else.
And I think
it's a reflection of society. Ultimately.
I think you run into a lot of appointments versus elected too.
Yeah. I suppose that makes a big difference.
The sheriff is an elected position. The chief is an appointed position. So who is your audience at that point? When my audience is 60,000 people that are going to elect me, I may have a different outlook on how I'm going to do business.
Sure.
Versus 7 people that sit on a council that have direct control over if I get hired or fired.
Yeah.
They control my salary. They control everything. So who's my audience at that point? The same thing with the criminal justice side. You have a county attorney or a district attorney that's elected, and then they get to appoint people. Who's their audience? Who's the audience of that person appointed? Well, that person who's appointed is getting appointed by someone.
Yeah. Seems pretty loose.
So, I don't
like
know.
A club. Kind
yeah.
of. Yeah.
And I don't know if making more positions, elected positions, would help. I tend to believe that the more you have accountability to the public in general, the more you're going to focus on your audience, the more you're going to focus on and having that as my goal to please versus having 7 people or 5 people or however big your council is
who may be completely out of touch with the overwhelming majority. I think your perspective is really, really important, especially the time that we live in. It's in my lifetime, I've never felt as much division. I don't think it's true. I think that it's publicized. Yeah. I think it's more. I think
it goes in waves.
Yeah.
I think it goes in waves. You can check out like the early '90s, especially like LA, the early '90s. And then you had your kind of high wave, and then you had a low wave, and we're back up on that high wave again. Mm-hmm. And it's just all about where does it flatten out to?
Yeah. What do we learn from it? How do we grow from it? And I feel like. There are people out there that are recognizing issues on both sides, socioeconomic issues and issues potentially in the justice system and making reforms. There's more police officers and more departments that are making this kind of ongoing training either mandatory for their departments or they're just doing it. And it doesn't take long to do it to see the benefit. I've been told physically, on the job, and just psychologically as a way to decompress from doing something, and doing something that has such a high relatability to the job.
Yeah.
Anything in closing, anything that you want to leave with the audience or any perspective you want to leave with the audience or say? And then I'll get your 3 keys to life.
I think the biggest thing is like what I said in the beginning is law enforcement is encompassed by people.
They're citizens.
They're citizens. Yeah. They're your average person that's doing a job. Being critical on situations that yes, they have a level of training, but it's also their citizens doing the job. Mm. People are going to have good days and people are going to have bad days, and people are going to react to situations positively and negatively, and we have such a great hindsight now to Monday morning quarterback all these situations, and I think we're losing the human factor on a lot of this.
Agreed.
And there's some great organizations out there, like Humanize the Badge. They do a great job of showing, not just the officer playing basketball with the kid in the park, but just saying, hey, these are people. They're your sons, they're your daughters. Mm-hmm. They're the people out there putting the badge on and saying, I want to hold the line for you. I want to make sure you're safe. I want to make sure everyone's safe. And I want to make sure the society can function. Mm-hmm. So,
well, like that just reminded me of something. There's people in every walk of life there's some people that have been dealt way worse shit than I have, and they've excelled on a higher level. They've become more successful. The same thing is going to kind of apply in every field that we work in. And I feel like police often and law enforcement are set this certain expectation that's inhuman. And then they're griped about when they're expected to make very huge calls in a very short amount of time. So having that empathetic approach, and there's a lot of people out there listening that will go, who the fuck is this guy to talk about empathy? Well, hopefully by now they've been able to actually see you. That's the whole point of this podcast, is that when you listen to people, you go, oh, yeah, well, yeah. Instead of just text, or instead of just a grainy video or a clear video. But if you were talking to insecure Keoni of my boyhood, and you were trying to instill in me some confidence or hope or faith in my future, what would be the 3 takeaways of your life experience to guide me in a positive direction?
I think the first one and the main one I would say is have your failures, but learn from your failures. And I think for me personally, having my failures in my life has taught me more than anything else. Professionally, personally, it has made me the human being I am, and being able to learn from that, though, like that's the biggest key is, I want, like I was talking to Damien the other day, I was like, if I come to practice and I don't get tapped out, I feel like I haven't gone hard enough, because I want to come into practice and try stuff and experiment. And I want people to be able to like, oh yeah, here's an armbar. Or, hey, okay. And then I can learn from that, and I can say, okay, well, I did this. Where do I need to go from there?
Through loss, we like whittle away to the highest form of self. And that's why it's such a pivotal thing. It's such an important concept in martial arts, to just get a little bit better every single day, a little bit better every single day.
And I think that if you're not having failures in life, and I'm not saying going out and, I guess I don't know how to put that,
but failure.
Yeah.
What is failure? Failure is perceived by some as an end.
Yep.
And then, to other people, it's a little bit closer. To their desired result. Perfect. The optimist versus the pessimist. It's the glass is half empty or the glass is half full. Embrace that failure. But maybe recharacterize the failure as a lesson or a part of the natural learning curve. I feel like in this, we can say that we live in an entitled society. People think that you only have to fail like 3 or 4 times and then you're a superstar. That ain't the way that shit works. Anybody of any notoriety has failed thousands of times. And the cliche is the Edison light bulb, even though Tesla's a cooler guy than Edison is. But
draft Tesla.
But that is anybody who's ever attained anything or done anything great has had to commit huge amounts of themselves to it. So
I think number 2 would be find a passion. In the good times and in the bad times, that passion is something that can take you and keep you whole and keep you surviving and keep you going. It could be anything out there, but if you have something that you're passionate about, that you're something that you're going to learn, that's something you're going to continue to evolve, that's something that's going to keep your mind straight, that's going to keep you hey, I've had a really bad day. I'm going to go do this. Yeah, I'm clear. I'm mentally clear now, and I can do that.
It's like a love, right?
Yep.
And a compass.
Yep.
To keep you pushing forward.
You know, and I think the last one is just embrace the grind, embrace that hard work, you know, and understand that just because I work hard, I may not achieve everything I'm going for, but then with those failures, I can learn. And that goes back to that first one. But if you don't embrace that grind and willing to put into that grind,
and don't assume that you're owed anything.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you work hard, great. If you work
you're
hard,
going to learn a lesson. You're going to learn a lesson no matter what.
And you'll keep climbing the mountain,
Yeah.
and you'll end up at a higher place than you ever were. But don't make the mistake of making an expectation that I'm going to be this just because I work hard. There's a lot of people that work hard, you know. But I'll tell you what, working hard, building a community, opening your doors, saying, "Hey, I get it.
Yeah.
Like it's shitty out there right now. It's shitty for everybody." But we want to make it less shitty.
Yeah.
If everybody did that, we went to this place, Genesis Land in Israel, when Israel was open before COVID. And he left us, this guy from Detroit that was a Jewish settler, he made this really cool place where you go and have like period dinner and stuff. And he's like, when you go back, this is what I want you to do. Just make a more honest effort to bring people into your home and break bread with them or have conversation with them. Go find people that are completely outside of your culture, your society, and invite them into your home, and you're going to see that we're all exactly the same.
Yep.
And the fact that we can't take these ancient truths and make them work almost to me points to somebody trying to get in the way, somebody trying to hold back a populace from seeing this very, very simple truth.
Yeah.
Tribalism and instinctive urges don't help, but hopefully we're at a point in time with this information that we have and with this pseudo connectivity through the internet where people can start looking at podcasts like this and getting back to tableside conversations and going, you know what, like I don't like some of the things about what's going on right now and some of the things I'm seeing reported, but I watched this 1.5-hour podcast with this guy, Erik, who's in law enforcement, and he's proof that there's people out there that want to do the job well. They want to serve justly. And if they're out there, I can't just wildly attack law enforcement.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I know that now, hopefully, if I'm a listener to this, that Erik has taught me that these are all just people.
Yeah.
Flawed, some of them amazing, but people nonetheless.
Yep.
So, awesome, brother. I appreciate it. No,
Appreciate it. I know.
Thank
you.